We have a lot of BBCs on the seven limb prayer already, but I'm going to talk about it again because we continually do retreats, and the seven limb prayer is actually quite important for accumulating merit and purifying our minds. A couple of years ago, we were doing the Medicine Buddha practice in our winter retreat, and I came across a description in one of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's books, Teachings from the Medicine Buddha Puja. And just reading a few lines of how he was describing, including the seven limb prayer, really energized my practice. And so since that time, I have felt a lot more connection with the seven limbs. And we find them in sutra practices, we find them in tantric practices. If we think about the seven limbs, 4 of them help us to accumulate extensive merit when we're prostrating, making offerings, requesting the Buddhas to turn the wheel of Dharma and remain in this world. And then there's the limb of purification. And then the limbs of dedicating and rejoicing help us to increase the merit that we already have. And as far as I can tell, accumulating merit and purifying our minds is pretty much the name of the game as we're heading into the path. So we need both of these, whether we're at the very beginning of our practice, whether we're looking at the initial scope of the practice, or we're all the way to the end of the practice. We need these 7 limbs. We need the accumulation of merit and purification of our mind. So since we're going through the abbreviated recitations in each session of our winter retreat, then I thought it would be helpful to share just some of the things that have been meaningful for me. I like the way Venerable Kadro introduces this prayer. She talks about 7 individual practices, and that really helps to open our mind to think of something more than just reciting 7 lines without giving them much thought. And so we can recite the whole set very briefly, or we can take each one and spend quite a bit of time really reflecting on it, really generating and cultivating that particular limb and what it's thinking about, what it's trying to counter, the affliction in our mind, and also what it's trying to cultivate or promote in our mind as well. So I'll just talk about a few ways. Now, this practice comes from the King of Prayers, where it's talked about kind of extensively as a practice. I'm sure the Buddha talked about each one of these in many, many sutras, but it seemed like Samantabhadra brought them together for us. In fact, if you think about his 10 great vows, you'll see the 7 limbs. They go like this: I vow to pay homage to all the Buddhas and praise the Tathagatas. That's the first one. I vow to make unlimited offerings. I vow to repent and reform all karmic hindrances. I vow to rejoice in others' merit and virtue. I vow to request that the Buddhas turn the Dharma wheel. I vow to request that the Buddhas continue living in the world. I vow to follow always the Buddha's teachings. I vow to comply always with the needs of all sentient beings, and I vow to dedicate all merit and virtue universally. So he's including a lot of bodhicitta in his. 2 of those vows somehow aren't included in the 7, but we can say they're implied. So in the first 12 verses of the King of Prayers, he gives us some very clear ideas of how to make these 7 a little more extensive. So the first verse: you lions among humans gone to freedom in the present, past, and future, in the worlds of 10 directions, to all of you with body, speech, and sincere mind, I bow down. So with the refuge field visualized in front of us, then we pay homage with our body, speech, and mind. And the next couple of verses really flesh that out for us. So this is cultural, isn't it? In ancient India, people would bow to show respect. In fact, even today, when you go to India, you will see people touching their forehead and then touching someone else's feet. And so we might give some thought to what would our culture identify as a respectful act when we have an important guest, meeting an important person, or receiving an important guest. I don't think we have many, but we could think about it. Not as simple as prostrating. So to make this practice extensive, then Samantabhadra suggests that we visualize before us countless Buddhas of the past, present, and future, and of all the 10 directions. So in other words, we're just trying to fill our entire mind with Buddhas. Our merit is multiplied by the number of Buddhas and other holy beings that we imagine in the space in front. Or we can imagine the extensive refuge field appearing on each and every atom. That's another way. It kind of comes later in the prayer, but that's another way to make it more extensive. And, without much thought, this can be a very empty gesture. All of us when we go into a temple, we make 3 prostrations. But how often are we actually thinking about what all those gestures are about and what we're doing with our mind? I know for myself, I can get quite lazy, so I enjoyed going through this again to remind myself what it is I'm supposed to be thinking about as I'm making the prostrations. So physically, we prostrate with our hands together, or we can perform a short prostration, a long prostration. Verbally, we're prostrating with our speech by praising them. Now, in our sessions, we're in silence, so we're not doing that, but we can think about the good qualities that we would praise if we were speaking. And then mentally, all of this helps us to generate a sense of deep faith and respect in the Buddhas and the holy beings. So the second verse spells out how we should prostrate physically. It says, with the energy of aspiration for the Bodhisattva way, with a sense of deep respect, and with as many bodies as atoms of the world, to all you Buddhas visualized before me, I bow down. So it goes without saying that bringing a bodhicitta motivation into our practice really increases the merit we're going to accumulate. And just as we increase the number of Buddhas and holy beings, we can also increase our merit by imagining that we are as numberless as atoms of the universe. So we can do that in different ways. Or we could also think about just leading all our past lives in doing these prostrations. One suggestion was that it might be difficult for us to actually think about leading all of our past lives and doing these prostrations, but we can think about a field of wheat. Probably you've all seen a field of wheat or grain, like down at the Palouse when you're driving to Portland. Just imagine all the wheat grains going like this. I thought that was very beautiful. And then one thing that came to my mind when I do this practice is to think about, I'm also leading all the hell beings and all their past lives in doing this prostration. All the beings it's very Lama Zopa-like, isn't it? All the hell, hungry ghosts, all the animals, all the humans. And actually thinking about, I want to make a connection with all these beings. I want to lead them to make these prostrations because I aspire to be a Buddha to be able to benefit them. So just saying those words don't mean much, but in retreat, when we really think about this deeply, it can really move the mind. So if we visualize 100,000 replicas of our body doing prostrations, then it's like we've done 100,000 prostrations. It almost sounds too simple, but this is what's said. And the essential point is what's happening, in our mind. We're showing respect. So the main thing is our attitude, that we're trying to counter arrogance, afflicted pride. We're also trying to cultivate humility and respect and faith. So when I was reading through the description in Geshe Sopa's commentary, he went into a description of what we're doing with our hands and what we're doing with our body, speech, and mind. And I found it a very good reminder that, we put our hands together and put those thumbs together. It's like the jewel of Avalokiteshvara. We are aspiring to lead all sentient beings to find lasting happiness and to be free of suffering. And then thinking about what we're doing when we're touching those 4 places. I mean, think about it. This morning, when you came into the hall, what were you thinking about when you did those 3 prostrations? Some mornings, probably not much. But really thinking about, the crown protrusion on the Buddha's head. That's one of the most difficult. I think it is the most difficult sign of the Buddha to cultivate, accumulating the merit. And partly that comes from showing respect to his teachers, Buddha's teachers, and elders. And then putting the hands in the middle of the eyebrows, the forehead, thinking about that hair curl. Now it's a mysterious mark of a Buddha that, you can pull it out and you can't find the end of it. But I don't know what that's about. But also I learned that was thinking about the Buddha's body when you touch the forehead. And then the Buddha's speech, 60 melodious qualities, which if we really think about those carefully, it's amazing that a Buddha can say one thing and all the beings that hear it would understand exactly the next steps they need to make on the path just by hearing him utter one syllable. That's quite amazing. And then the Buddha's mind, really thinking about You know, the incredibleness of being able to hold the two truths together in one mind. It's quite amazing. So as you go into your next session and you're making those prostrations, really think about those 4 points that we're touching and why they're important to us, why we do that. We're not just swatting flies, you know, we're really trying to do a practice. So then the next stanza says, on every atom are Buddhas, numberless as atoms, each amidst a host of bodhisattvas, and I am confident the sphere of all phenomena is entirely filled with Buddhas in this way. So in this verse, we're paying homage with our mind, and I love this aspect of thinking about how a Buddha's omniscient mind pervades everywhere. That's phenomenal. You know, if a Buddha knows all knowable objects, then a Buddha's mind has to pervade everywhere. There's never a place that we're not in the presence of the Buddhas. So again, to make this more extensive, we can imagine that on every atom there are innumerable Buddha fields on every atom, not just one Buddha field, but innumerable Buddha fields. This is what a Samantapada practice is. So I guess Samantapada was really good about imagining 5 lights, and then each of those lights also multiply into 5 more lights, or 100 more lights, or 1,000 more lights, and it just keeps growing till it fills our mind. And that has an impact on our practice. And then paying homage with our speech, with infinite oceans of praise for you and oceans of sound from the aspects of my voice, I sing the breathtaking excellence of Buddhas and celebrate all you gone to bliss. So here it's suggested that we imagine ourselves having, each of our multiplied bodies having countless heads. I find that difficult. And countless tongues coming from each head. I find that difficult. But we just have to, I think there's a little creative license with this practice that we can make it work for us. So if you find that challenging to think of many tongues coming from one head, then find something else that works for you. That's what I've done. And here we can actually, with our speech, you know, we're thinking about the qualities of the Buddha and praising his qualities. So we can think about the 4 fearlessnesses, the 10 powers, really thinking about those deeply. I love thinking about those. And the 18 unshared qualities. And then another way to bring more strength to this practice is to think about the emptiness of each activity that's happening. The person who's prostrating is empty, the action of the prostration is empty, the beings that we're prostrating to are also empty of inherent existence. And so when we prostrate, we're not just throwing our body on the ground 3 times or however many times we're prostrating, but we're a proper prostration really includes all 3 doors. And if we practice this well, it says that we do accumulate incredible merit. So I'm curious, maybe you have other ways that you increase, particularly this first limb of prostration. Anybody want to add anything?
When I can't prostrate, which is more and more frequent now, I do that entire practice visualizing in my mind, and I feel like that is as powerful as the actual physical doing it.
Yeah, Geshe Sopa makes the point that it's our attitude and our intention that is the most important aspect. The physical prostrations help, but right, the mental attitude is most important. Okay, thank you.